we're gonna start off the list with a pretty insane news story that didn't really make the rounds over here, which is surprising because this is absolutely nuts. So last year, residents of a small isolated village in Peru claimed to have been attacked in the night by 7-foot-tall alien beings with glowing yellow eyes. They also had dark hoods and wore armor. They looked a bit like Green Goblin from Spider-Man. At one point, one of the beings even tried to kidnap a young woman of the village. And these attacks happened repeatedly, to the point where many villagers said they were living in fear. A number of residents claimed to have fired at the creatures, but they didn't go down. They could also fly. This was all over South American news. The Peruvian military was even called in to do night patrols. So what the hell was going on here? Well, the media has now come out saying that the attacks weren't aliens, but they were just illegal miners dressed as aliens trying to scare the villagers off. But how does that explain them being seemingly immune to bullets or flying? Carlos Castro Quintanilla, the prosecutor investigating the case, believes that the miners must have been using state-of-the-art technology that allowed them to fly. What does he think these illegal miners, what do they somehow have access to jetpacks? I don't know. I'm not buying that. I'm on the fence about this one. It could be illegal miners. Maybe they had bulletproof vests, but the jetpack thing, I've seen real life jetpacks and they are clunky messes. They're just, first of all, no one has access to those things. And even like flying them around, it's just, it's not a smooth kind of thing. We don't have jetpacks, all right? Plus, I think these villagers are smart enough to know the difference between people in masks and awful jetpacks and alien beings. I don't know. A whole bunch of these villagers all said they saw this, so it's interesting.
Next up, we have the Battle of Los Angeles, or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, which took place on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. That night, all of Los Angeles went under blackout as directed by the US military, meaning all lights were off. And while the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above was lit up by a myriad of strange, unidentified flying objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers were absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition fired up into the sky appeared to have no effect on the UFO or UFOs. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found, in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off of the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. 3 more were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. To this day, it is unknown what objects filled the sky of Los Angeles that night. The event went down in history as one of the largest UFO sightings to date. We really don't know what happened, but if you have any theories, feel free to let us know in the comments.
Next on the list, we have the Shag Harbor Incident. At 11:20 p.m. on October 4th, 1967, multiple witnesses in Nova Scotia watched as a mysterious object crashed into the waters of Shag Harbor. But let's backtrack a little and go over some of the other sightings from that night leading up to this. It all began with Air Canada Flight 305, where First Officer Robert Ralph alerted Captain Pierre Charbonneau to a strange object outside the aircraft over Sherbrooke in Saint John, Quebec. It was described as a brightly lit rectangular object with smaller lights trailing it. Meanwhile, Daryl Dory and his family in Mahone Bay saw a large object in the sky. Captain Leo Howard Mercy, a fisherman, witnessed stationary blips on his radar. He, along with his crew, then looked up to see 4 bright objects in a rectangular formation in the sky. News stations were also being flooded with numerous other people reporting glowing objects over Halifax. And then we have the crash. A ton of residents reported hearing a whoosh, followed by a loud bang, and at least 11 people reported seeing a low-flying object crash into the water of Shag Harbor. I'm sure you hear a lot of banging sounds around Shag Harbor. Terrible joke. Witnesses watched as an object with glowing lights floated in the water. It was just kind of like floating there. The RCMP was then called in, who then contacted the Rescue Coordination Center, but before they could arrive, the object started to sink into the water. The Coast Guard was called in, as well as the military. No debris or survivors were found, and according to the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax, all commercial, private, and military aircraft they were all accounted for along the eastern seaboard. Whatever this object was, it's never been identified, and it has been officially designated as an unidentified flying object.
Next on our list today, we have the North Yorkshire, England event, which took place in 1952. Reports of a bright silver disc-shaped object the size of a large bus hovering in the sky began spreading across the country. The aircraft was witnessed by people from many different towns, as well as Royal Air Force pilots. In the days that followed, more similar objects were spotted in the skies above the county. People described the aircrafts as being even larger than the one in the first sighting, and described their maneuvers as being impossible for any known aircraft at the time. The events went on for many days and had hundreds of witnesses. Some even used radar technology to track the unknown craft, but no one was able to figure out its origin. Speculation of the UFO being an alien spaceship quickly took off, with others believing that the spherical ships belonged to the government and that they had been deployed into the sky for some kind of super secret military operation. Well, here's the thing. The event took place over 70 years ago, and the government has yet to fess up to the ships being theirs, which at this point you'd think they would have done, right? I mean, to be fair, if they did fess up by now, I probably still wouldn't believe them, but I want to know what you guys think. Alien spacecraft or yet another government cover-up story?
Next up is the Cash Landrum Incident. On the evening of December 29th, 1980, Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson Colby Landrum were driving home to Dayton, Texas after dining out when they encountered a mysterious diamond-shaped object emitting flames and intense heat. It was floating above the trees. At first, Landrum, thinking it was a sign of the second coming, told Cash to stop the car. Cash considered turning back, but the road was too narrow. The object was described as intensely bright, with small blue lights descending toward the road, emitting flames periodically. Cash and Landrum had gotten out of the car to look at the object, but got back in when the heat became more and more intense. It got so bad that it burned Cash's hand when she touched the car. Landrum even left a handprint on the dashboard. Then the object started ascending again, and after it was back up in the air, a group of military helicopters surrounded it. So after making it back home that night, the three started feeling off, reporting symptoms like nausea and skin burns after the encounter, with Cash experiencing severe health issues, including large blisters and clumps of her hair falling out. Vicki developed a cataract, and Betty was diagnosed with cancer later on. Symptoms resembling radiation exposure, really looks like. The two went on to seek legal action, suing the US government for $20 million, but the case ended up being dismissed.
Alright, next on our list we have the Gorman Incident. In October of 1948, Second Lieutenant George F. Gorman was flying a P-15 Mustang aircraft during a training flight. Everything seemed to be going pretty routine until he noticed a strange object in the sky. At first he assumed it to be some type of weather balloon or other kind of experimental aircraft, but as he flew closer to the object to get a better observation, he realized it was something entirely different. He described it as some kind of pulsating, glowing ball of light. He tried to fly away from it, but to his surprise, the object began to follow him. Gorman tried to outmaneuver the unidentifiable flying object, but he was unsuccessful. He claimed that it appeared as though the UFO could anticipate his moves before they even happened. After a while, Gorman began to get seriously freaked out, and in a final attempt to lose this strange glowing ball, he decided the best plan of action was a nosedive. He dove the plane directly towards the ground, and after a 27-minute chase, he was able to lose the object. He leveled out his plane and lived to tell the tale. But no one, including Gorman, knows exactly what was seen in the sky that day. But what's even crazier is that after the incident, his plane tested positive for radioactivity. No one knows why. That's so wild.
Next on the list is the Alderney UFO sighting. On April 23, 2007, pilot Ray Boyer and his passengers observed a strange light while flying near Alderney. At first he thought it was reflected light, but soon realized that it was an object, estimating its size to be about a mile wide. He described it as bright yellow gold with black bands on the side. He also spotted a second object, similar but further away. Boyer reported the sighting to authorities, labeling it a near miss. Now, despite his report, the British Ministry of Defense didn't carry out an investigation, stating it occurred in French airspace. Witnesses on Boyer's aircraft and another pilot from Blue Islands confirmed seeing similar objects. One described it as sunlight colored and another as an elongated oval.
Next up, we have a UFO sighting at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. The incident took place at 4:15 p.m. on November 7th of 2006, so it's actually pretty recent. 12 different airport employees reported seeing a large saucer-shaped, unidentified flying object hovering over one of the airport gates, gate C-17 to be exact. And it was actually hovering above another aircraft that had been set to depart O'Hare but was delayed because there was a giant flying saucer hovering above it. Duh. The pilots in the plane, along with mechanics on the ground and airline management, reported to have seen the object. But air traffic controllers, however, did not see it because for some reason the craft above the plane was not picked up on their radars. The UFO was visible for several minutes before it suddenly disappeared. And even though the incident had many credible witnesses and was later investigated by the Federal Aviation Administration, no explanation was ever given regarding the events of the day.
Alright, Travis Walton case. So this story has it all. A UFO sighting corroborated by multiple witnesses and a supposed encounter with alien beings. So it was November 5th, 1975. Travis Walton and his fellow loggers had finished up their day in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. They loaded onto their truck and began the drive back home. They hadn't gotten far though when they noticed odd lights hovering above some trees. They decided to drive closer to see what was going on, and that's when they saw a massive unidentified object. Travis got out of the truck to see what the thing was, and then was suddenly lifted into the air by a beam of light. The rest of his friends drove out of there in a panic, but knew they couldn't leave him there. By the time they returned to the scene though, Travis was gone, and he would be missing for days. 5 days after disappearing, Travis Walton showed up again though. He placed a call to his sister's place from a phone booth outside of town. He was found disoriented and disturbed and began telling this horrifying story about how he'd woken up in a hospital-like room where two bald, alien-like entities were looking down at him. He tried to fight the creatures off before a human being wearing a helmet led him to another room where 3 other humans put a plastic mask over his face. He then lost consciousness again before waking up by the side of the highway.
And to finish off our list today, we have the possible involvement of a UFO in the disappearance of an F-89C Scorpion jet fighter. The aircraft had been used in a training mission over Lake Superior in Michigan in 1953. It had left from the Kincheol Air Force Base, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, with 2 incredibly experienced pilots at its controls. As it tends to, everything was going smoothly until it wasn't. All of a sudden, the plane had disappeared from the tracking radars on the ground, and it was replaced by something else, an object that was moving around erratically and rapidly. Ground operators were unable to identify what it might be, but knew that it couldn't possibly be the missing aircraft due to its movements. Eventually, that object also vanished from the radar. An investigation was conducted on the disappearance of the jet fighter as well as the pilots on board, as well as the origin of the second radar detection. But it should come as a shock to none of you that the investigation revealed absolutely nothing. But officials did say that based on the pilot's level of expertise and the relatively easy nature of the flight, it's highly unlikely that their disappearance was an accident. But what do you guys think?
And we're going to start things off with Point Dume Underwater Base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, it's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a dome stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site." Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing god-like beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the island's appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote in the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across 2 chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal Incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945, when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, "I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them." Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be like digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the 1976 Tehran Incident. The 1976 Tehran UFO incident is a notable case in UFOlogy that took place on September 19, 1976. The incident involved a luminous object that was observed hovering over the city by two F-4 Phantom II jet interceptors of the Iranian Air Force. The object was detected on radar and appeared to be capable of jamming the communication systems of the jets. The pilots reported that they saw a brightly lit diamond-shaped object that emitted a green light, and they attempted to engage it with missiles. However, the object evaded their attempts and quickly disappeared. At a pilots conference in 2007, one of the pilots in this incident, Parvez Jafari, said he attempted to fire at the UFO, but something strange was preventing him from doing so. He said, quote, "My weapons jammed and my radio communications garbled." The incident was investigated by the Iranian government and the US Defense Intelligence Agency, and it has been the subject of much speculation and debate among UFO enthusiasts. Some argue that the incident was evidence of extraterrestrial activity, while others suggest it may have been a secret military experiment or some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Despite the official investigation, the incident remains unresolved and its true nature remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the McMinnville UFO photographs. The McMinnville UFO photographs are a series of 2 photographs taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on May 11, 1950 in McMinnville, Oregon. The photos depict a metallic disc-shaped object in the sky with trees and buildings visible in the foreground. The Trents claimed that they saw the object hovering in the sky and were able to capture it on camera. The photographs quickly gained widespread attention and were widely circulated in newspapers and magazines, and they were also examined by several experts, including the US Air Force, which conducted an investigation known as Project Blue Book. Famous project here on Most Amazing Top 10. The Trents maintained that the photographs were genuine and that they had not tampered with them in any way. However, some skeptics have suggested suggested that the photographs may have been hoaxed or that the objects in the photographs were just a common object. Despite the controversy surrounding the photographs, however, they remain one of the most famous and well-known UFO sightings in history. The photographs have been the subject of numerous articles, books, and documentaries, and have inspired countless discussions and debates about the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. In our number 8 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this, the crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at about 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, the white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So, faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Aguadilla Airport incident. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident occurred on April 25th, 2013, when a strange object was spotted hovering above the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. The object was initially detected by radar and later confirmed by security cameras as a glowing, unidentified object that appeared to be traveling at a low altitude. The object was described as being around 4 to 5 feet in length, and it moved very quickly and very erratically. It was also observed to emit a bright white light and appeared to be changing shape. The incident attracted widespread attention and was investigated by several government agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. The object was ultimately classified as an unidentified flying object, or UFO, and no explanation was given for its presence in the area. It is even said that a US Customs and Border Protection aircraft actually captured infrared video of the incident that was given to the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy by a whistleblower. This video is said to show the UFO traveling at super low altitudes, sometimes lower than the treetops, but at speeds close to 100 miles per hour. The Aguadilla Airport UFO incident is considered one of the most significant UFO sightings in recent history due to the high level of documentation and the involvement of government agencies. It continues to be a topic of discussion and speculation among UFO enthusiasts and researchers, and has contributed to ongoing efforts to uncover the truth about the nature and origin of UFO sightings around the world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. Okay, we talk about Project Blue Book a lot. You gotta know what it is. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952 when he was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports of a UFO that had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't quite believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see 2 circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see 2 beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over over to the side where I could see them. He claims he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles per hour. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne-Mansfield helicopter incident. The Coyne-Mansfield helicopter UFO incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were all experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have Apollo 11. So we can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life and UFOs, but who would know more than the people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the world, there haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that seems completely unexplainable. People who have claimed these sorts of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well with their claims. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but then Mission Control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with no answers on what the flying object could be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. Also, I can't believe that I hadn't heard of that story before, because to me, that sounds like full-blown alien contact. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos, and there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter. Using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Delphos Ring Incident. The Delphos Ring UFO incident occurred on November 2nd, 1971 in Delphos, Kansas, when a family witnessed a strange object hovering over their farm. The UFO emitted a bright light that illuminated the surrounding area and left a glowing ring in the ground after it disappeared. The family reported the incident to the local sheriff, who took a sample of the ring for analysis. Investigations were conducted by several experts, including the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, who collected soil samples and found that the ring was caused by the removal of topsoil, which had been exposed to a high amount of heat. Additionally, a high level of radiation was also detected at the site. The incident received widespread media coverage and sparked debates about the existence of extraterrestrial life and the possibility of alien visitation. Some skeptics argued that the incident could have been caused by natural phenomena or a hoax, but the witnesses maintained that they saw a genuine UFO. Despite the years of investigation, it's been no conclusive explanation for the incident has been found, leaving the mystery of the Delphos Ring UFO unsolved. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor Incident. This incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting out on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight flight, pilot, and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on its Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board either. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. It was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for, so what could have all those witnesses seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO.
Now, if you know anything about UFOs, you know about the Roswell incident that took place on a farm in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. But if you don't, here's the quick notes. In 1947, a UFO crash landed on Mac Brazel's farm. He didn't think much of it until UFO reports started coming out in the local newspaper. Brazel notified local authorities, the Air Force got involved, the crashed object was taken to Area 51, and the whole thing was written off as a crashed weather balloon, despite Brazel and military personnel claiming otherwise. Well, did you know that from 1947 to 2018, the crash site was a designated no-go zone? That's right, the entire area was closed off to the public for an entire 71 years, likely so the government could cover all their bases in ensuring that the public would never know the true nature of the crash. In 2018, the site was finally reopened to the public, but unfortunately, at this point, all evidence of what was most definitely an alien spaceship — you don't close off an area for 71 years because of a crashed weather balloon — is now long gone.
The Kecksburg UFO case has to be one of the strangest UFO cases in history. On December 9th, 1965, people in 6 US states, as well as parts of Canada, reported spotting a fireball streak across the sky over Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. Then folks in the small village of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, claimed to see something crash into the woods after seeing wisps of blue smoke and feeling vibrations. Authorities cordoned off the area and searched the forest, later claiming to find nothing and saying the object was likely just a meteor. But that didn't line up with what a number of witnesses had seen. People who did manage to get close to the crash site described seeing a large acorn-shaped object partially buried in the ground. It was about the size of a small car and had strange markings that almost looked like hieroglyphics, but they didn't get a very long look before the military stepped in. So what exactly was this object? Was it a Soviet satellite, a piece of top-secret military equipment? Was it not from Earth at all? This case is nowhere near as famous as something like Roswell, but it has come up on shows like Unsolved Mysteries, and UFO investigators still reference it to this day. But the truth as to what really crashed into the forest is still undisclosed.
Since the Roswell incident, New Mexico has been a hot spot for UFO sightings. UFO crashes, however, are far less common, but they still do happen, no matter how much the FBI and the Pentagon wants us to think they don't. Luckily, free speech is still more or less a thing. Or we probably never would have heard of the March 25th, 1948 UFO crash at Hart Canyon Hiking Trail, in which a spacecraft of unknown origins crashed into the mesa and was promptly recovered and covered up by the United States Air Force and 5th Army Division. According to a plaque located at the site, the recovery operation took a total of 2 weeks to complete, and all materials taken from the site were brought to the Los Alamos Laboratory for scientific study and evaluation. According to eyewitness reports, the spacecraft was approximately 100 feet in diameter and 18 feet tall, and according to insiders, it had been transporting as many as 16 extraterrestrials who, unfortunately, all died on impact.
In the spring of 1941, 6 years before the infamous Roswell incident, something crashed just outside Cape Girardeau, Missouri. A local Reverend William Huffman had been called to perform last rites at the site, and when he arrived, He was shocked to see a strange metallic saucer-shaped object. Around it were small bodies, and the bodies didn't look human. He claimed the bodies were about 4 feet tall, with large heads and eyes and thin limbs. The military quickly took control, removing the wreckage and the bodies, and the incident was hushed up. The story remained mostly a family secret until years later, when Huffman's granddaughter, Charlotte Mann, recounted what her grandmother had told her. According to Mann, her grandfather also saw strange hieroglyphic-like symbols inside of this craft, similar to those described in other UFO crash stories. No official documents confirming the crash have ever been released, but some say this is just another example of a successful government cover-up.
While Ohio's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is not believed to be a secret crash site, many people do claim that it is a place where crashed UFOs are taken to be studied and reverse engineered. Specifically in Hangar 18, the legendary alien warehouse located on the base, where many UFO enthusiasts believe the government hides flying saucer debris, the remains of extraterrestrials, and even live aliens. Speculation of the base began after the Roswell incident in 1947, and it has continued to this day, with many people claiming that reliable sources have confirmed its existence, i.e. former military personnel. One such man was a military pilot named Oliver Henderson, who allegedly told his wife that while working for the base he was required to fly a plane filled with UFO debris and several small alien bodies from Roswell to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another former pilot, Marion Black Mac McGruger, claimed that scientists at the base conducted experiments on a live extraterrestrial being and ended up killing it. Many other experiments are said to have been carried out at the base as well, although according to the FBI, the Pentagon, and the government, it's just a regular Air Force base where everything is completely above board.
On May 21st, 1953, there were a number of reports that a UFO crashed in the desert near Kingman, Arizona, and that the military had quickly swooped in to cover it up. Arthur Stansel, a mechanical engineer working for the Air Force at the time, claimed that he was part of a team that was rushed to the crash site to investigate and recover the debris. He described seeing a small disc-shaped craft partially buried in the ground. It was made of a shiny metallic material, and there were no visible seams or rivets, which made it look like it was molded from a single piece of metal. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and he also claimed to have seen the body of a creature being held in a tent next to the crashed aircraft, stating he saw, quote, the dead body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic suit. The skin on its face was dark brown. And of course, this was all covered up, with the material being loaded onto trucks and transported to an undisclosed location.
I have to say, I love a good whistleblower moment, especially when the whistleblowing is being done by military veterans in open court, and it's regarding the evidence of little green men. What a time to be alive. In July of 2023, 3 military veterans testified in a Congress hearing about UFOs and claimed that the United States government had been operating a secret UFO reverse engineering program for at least the past few decades. Claims were also made that the United States did in fact recover non-human biologics from certain alleged crash sites. Of course, the veterans were unable to go into extensive detail about the missions and operations that led to the discoveries and projects involving UFOs because they are obviously classified. But the simple act of the 3 men, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, David Grush, retired Air Force Major, and David Fravor, retired Navy Commander, openly admitting to the existence of both UFOs, alien life forms, and secret government programs regarding the two in open court, it's pretty huge.
On November 9th of 1974 in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, 3 teenage boys reported seeing a glowing object streaking across the sky before crashing into a nearby pond. They described the object as round and emitting a strange light, which continued to glow even after it hit the water. People started showing up at the scene, gawking at this mysterious object in the pond, and as word spread, more and more people gathered, and soon local police and fire departments arrived on scene. Witnesses claimed they saw them retrieve a small metallic object, which was then covered and taken away on a truck. Official explanations later claimed that this object was just a railroad lantern that had been thrown into the pond, but some weren't so convinced, and even today people still wonder if something more mysterious had actually plummeted into the water that night.
Prior to 1967, Shag Harbor, located at the southern tip of Nova Scotia, Canada, was a pretty understated fishing village. And then a UFO came to town. On October 4th, around 11:20 p.m., residents of Shag Harbor watched as a mysterious object descended from the sky and crash landed on the water. Witnesses claimed that the craft had 3 to 4 glowing orange lights and that it was about 60 feet in length. After landing in the water, the lights began to dim until eventually all that was left was a yellowish foam, indicating that the craft had either moved too distant to be seen or that it had sunken into the icy waters of Shag Harbor. Authorities searched the area until about 3 a.m., but nothing was ever found, nor has it been to this day. Although it was confirmed that the object was not a civilian or military aircraft, all of those had been accounted for. The day after the incident, the Rescue Coordination Center filed a report with Canadian Forces headquarters claiming that something had in fact touched down in the waters of Shag Harbor and that it was of unknown origin. As I said, to this day, the object has yet to be recovered. Maybe we'll get lucky this year.
On April 18, 1962, people across multiple states witnessed something flying through the sky, which eventually crashed near the Nellis Air Force Base outside Las Vegas. The object was tracked by NORAD, which made its way across 10 US states. The object was described as a bright red or blue fireball. It was first seen on the East Coast just outside of Syracuse. Things got even stranger when the object apparently landed at one point. An Air Force spokesman said the object was on the ground for about 42 minutes and that during this time a nearby power station mysteriously lost all power. As soon as the object took off again, the power was restored. The Air Force sent out jets which pursued it across the country. Then over the Mesquite Range in Nevada, the UFO exploded in a brilliant glare that was so bright it was visible over 5 states. What makes this case so incredible is the number of witnesses. Having crossed from the East Coast to the West Coast, the UFO was seen by thousands of people. But was it just a meteor or was it something else? That whole part about it landing and then cutting off power, that's very strange. That has not been explained.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the New Jersey UFO. This UFO sighting took place in 2001 just above the New Jersey Turnpike. On July 14th, 2001, just after midnight, for around 15 minutes, motorists driving down the highway stopped to stare at the sky to witness what no one could believe. There were strange orange and yellow lights in a V formation just above the Arthur Kill waterway. There were a ton of witnesses who were all extremely confused and shocked as to what they were seeing. Air traffic controllers initially denied that there were any flying objects that could have caused the mysterious lights, but a group called the New York Strange Phenomena investigators claimed that they received radar data that night that could corroborate all of the stories that the witnesses were telling. It may not have been aliens, but it certainly was some sort of unidentified flying object that no one had ever seen before, and there were people from all walks of life witnessing it together. In our number 9 spot today, we have habitable planets. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. So we once were on a journey to start off by figuring out which planets were actually habitable. And by that I mean which planets were rocky and which were orbiting a star within what is called the Goldilocks zone and had water, and that they weren't too hot or too cold so that water could be in liquid form. It just seems like the absolute basics needed in order to sustain life. Well, now, after more years of research, it is thought that actually about 1 in every 5 or 6 planets is actually a planet that could potentially sustain life. It is thought that there is roughly about 1 exoplanet for every star in our galaxy. That's a lot of planets, which means that's a lot of planets that could potentially have life. There certainly are planets that researchers believe are the most likely, but that doesn't mean that they are the only ones that should be looked into. Basically, what I'm saying is that there are, at the very least, millions of planets that could be hosting some form of life, whether it's an intelligent civilization or just single-cell organisms that have the potential to evolve over millions of years, just like us. Any kind of life would be a huge and exciting win for the science community, so it's just a reminder to us to keep searching because we never know what we're going to find. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half a mile wide, but the craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to the US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for human civilization. I want you guys to let me know in the comments if you believe the story that the government told, or if you trust the instincts of the people in Stephenville who saw that incident that day. In our number 7 spot today, we have time. This one is basically just the theory that we may not have found aliens yet because we haven't spent enough time looking for them. Realistically, it's been about half a century since we really gained the technological advancements that have allowed us to really look for them. In terms of the universe, that is the smallest little blink of an eye. Things take time, and it's incredibly possible that we just haven't had enough of it yet. Every year, as more money gets put into things like that, it allows incredibly smart and brilliant people the opportunity to create things that unbelievably make space more and more accessible to us. The more accessible it is, the more we will be able to discover. So maybe this is just a lesson in patience for all of us. If aliens do exist, I'm sure we'll find them at some point. Hopefully sooner rather than later, because I personally would like to meet an alien, but since I'm not an astronaut, I might have to wait a little longer than I'd like to. In our number 6 spot today, we have this unexplained UFO. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. There weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter, but using a Raytheon Advanced Targeting forward-looking infrared pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 5 spot today, we have They May Already Be Here. Okay, this one is for my conspiracy theorists out there. This is just the theory that maybe we can't find aliens because they've already found us and are actually walking among us, and we just don't know. I'm not quite sure the logistics of this one because I am definitely a human, and no alien who's posing as a human has ever revealed themselves to me personally, but I can't speak for everyone. It's possible that if this is true, aliens might be waiting for the right time to let us know that they've been walking around with us, or there may already be some lucky people out there who already know. I know a lot of us would be quite frightened of aliens if we did find concrete proof of their existence, and it might be likely that they're afraid of us as well. And if they are more intelligent than us and were able to find us first, they might just be testing out the waters to see what humans really think of them before letting us in on their secrets. So if you meet a stranger who starts asking you a bunch of questions about aliens, you might want to think twice next time. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006 and was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for around 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole where you could see the blue sky. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar, so the Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw the same thing. This story, however, became the most read story on the Chicago Tribune's website and even went international because it certainly is very interesting. In our number 3 spot today, we have light shifts. In the later half of 2000 2015, a Penn State astronomer named Jason Wright explained that there were pretty erratic and spontaneous shifts in the light that was coming from a newly discovered star. This star sits about 1,280 light years away from us on Earth, and these shifts were very similar to as if something was passing in front of our view of the star briefly before passing right through. Scientists weren't able to connect this to any exoplanets or anything like that, which we could understand, and this is what led Jason to quite an interesting theory. He stated that it is possible that the shifts are caused by massive objects passing in front of the star in a kind of orbit, like an array of massive satellites or a similar kind of structure, like the type of thing that would be produced by an intelligent and civilized life form. Again, like many things, it's just a theory, but a very compelling one at that. In our number 2 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this, the crew had been tracking a strange flying object, and this one would start out at around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of fighter jets. So faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what this was, but I'm sure a lot of us are thinking the same thing. In our number 1 spot today, we have radio signals. Basically, we're getting radio signals from somewhere, but we just aren't quite sure what exactly is going on there. It started in 2007 when we began getting what are called fast radio bursts, and they are a totally mysterious phenomena to scientists. These bursts are only a few milliseconds long, but they emit more energy than the sun does in 24 hours, which is just a statement that my brain struggles to comprehend. All of this is already super cool and very interesting, but here's an even crazier thing about them. The main thing we know about these bursts is that they are coming from outside of the Milky Way. They're coming from outside of our own galaxy. Space is the coolest and most unbelievable thing. This obviously had led a lot of experts to believe that it could be coming from an advanced civilization that is quite far away, and they may be trying to contact us, but we just don't have the technology to interpret the signals. Maybe one day scientists will figure out a way to accept whatever message it is they're trying to send, or maybe one day we'll get a visit from them and they'll be mad at us for not answering their messages. Either way, it's all very cool and very interesting.
In 1975, a pilot and several passengers flying a private plane near Pinegap's airspace saw something they would never forget. The facility had only started operating 5 years before. Everyone was wondering what the hell was really going on in there, and the passengers and crew were hoping they were going to see something while flying overhead, and see something they did. A large white object appeared, taking off from the base at an incredibly high speed. The object moved so fast that it was nearly impossible for the witnesses to get a good look at it before it vanished into the sky. The pilot, upon landing, reported the sighting. They were told to wait for investigators, and when these investigators arrived, they supposedly told the group to keep their mouths shut about what they'd seen and to forget the incident entirely. Obviously, not all of them did, and if there wasn't already heavy speculation and controversy about this facility amongst the Australian public before, there certainly was now. Now, what exactly is the Pinegap facility? Sitting right in the middle of the outback, not too far from the remote town of Alice Springs, officially it's known as the Joint Defense Facility Pinegap, and it's run by both the US and Australian governments. But what exactly goes on there? Like with any facility like this, there's the official answer and the more speculative ones. The facility is decked out with some serious tech. You know those big satellite dishes you see in movies? Pinegap has plenty of them. They're used for all sorts of high-tech communication and surveillance activity. Officially, the facility is involved in intelligence gathering, satellite tracking, and missile detection. It's always been a controversial place though. It's seen a number of protests over the years, and many of them aren't even necessarily to do with the rumors and conspiracies, but they certainly don't help with its image. Pinegap is rumored to be a secret site for advanced technology testing. Again, much like claims made about Area 51. A place where the military can try out their fancy new tech far away from the prying eyes of the public. And if you were gonna pick a spot for a test flight over your new advanced drone or aircraft, the Australian outback would be about as ideal as it gets. Ever seen Mad Max? Nothing out there but sand and kangaroos. I don't think there's actually any kangaroos in Mad Max, but you get my point. One of the main theories is that Pinegap is involved in developing and testing advanced drones and aircraft. These drones could be used for anything from reconnaissance missions to lethal attacks. More on that next though. There are also rumors about Pinegap being involved in cyber warfare testing, so developing new ways to protect against hacking or creating offensive strategies to mess with enemy computers. That's really the best way I can put it without doing a deep dive into exactly what hackers do on this kind of scale. I don't really know much about hacking other than the error messages I'd get that would screw up my janky old PC in the days of LimeWire. One of the biggest conspiracies is that Pinegap is involved in operating spy satellites. I'd say a big part of this is the fact that it's jointly operated by the United States and Australia. It's partly run by the CIA, so that leads to some speculation for sure. It's rumored that Pinegap plays a huge role in monitoring communications, radar, and other electronic signals from all over the world. The facility's remote location and the sophisticated tech make it a pretty ideal setup for controlling and receiving data from spy satellites orbiting Earth. There's a lot of speculation that Pinegap works with various intelligence agencies to gather information on foreign military activity, enemy organizations, and just various global threats. I mean, this is barely even in the realm of conspiracy. It is a fact. It's involved in intelligence gathering, so I don't think spy satellites are really all that much of a stretch. It's really more of a question of, well, what exactly does this entail? Of course, they don't provide specifics because that would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole spying thing. Another one of the numerous conspiracy theories surrounding Pinegap is its alleged role as an NSA or National Security Agency listening post. Edward Snowden famously brought this up, and it certainly makes the whole thing feel a lot more credible. According to the theory, Pinegap is involved in surveillance and data collection, targeting domestic and international communications, using its advanced listening technology to intercept phone calls, your emails. Edward Snowden isn't the only guy to come out having said this though. There are other whistleblower testimonies alleging that Pinegap collaborates closely with the NSA to gather intelligence. Their claim is that the facility's ideal location and the powerful antennas make for intercepting large amounts of data, which is then processed and analyzed by intelligence analysts. Another intense rumor about Pinegap is that it's involved in coordinating lethal drone strikes. Pinegap is believed to have the tech and connections to control and direct drones used in targeted killings. So we already know they have the technology to efficiently gather intelligence and track targets. So once a target is identified, the data is sent to operators who can launch and guide drones to hit specific targets, often in remote or hard to reach areas. These drones can carry out precision strikes, taking out high value targets with little to no risk to any human soldiers. The idea that Pinegap could be involved in operations like this, again, stems from the fact that it's another hub for US intelligence and military agencies. So it's no secret that the US has used drones for targeted strikes in various parts of the world, and Pinegap's advanced technology would be a major asset for this type of thing. Accusations about drone strikes have been denied, but I mean, of course, they're gonna deny something like that. Targeted drone strikes are probably the most controversial part of modern warfare. After one drone strike in July of 2013 in Pakistan, campaigners claimed the intelligence for the strike came from Pinegap. There was a ton of outrage, and a number of human rights groups called for a UN inquiry into whether the Australian government could be seen as complicit in the strikes alongside the US military. There were even some allegations that Australian officials might have facilitated targeted killing, which would be against international law. Now on to the stuff you've all been waiting for, of course, aliens and UFOs. Pinegap has been a hotspot for conspiracy theories involving extraterrestrial research pretty much ever since it began operations. Some people are convinced that the facility is hiding evidence of alien life and is deeply involved in studying them and their technology. And this isn't just a situation of like, oh well, a big top secret government facility, gotta be aliens, right? No, there have been a lot of strange sightings in the area surrounding Pinegap. Some people will even claim that Pinegap is part of a global network of secret bases that collaborate on extraterrestrial research. Again, the American involvement certainly plays into this, so Pinegap may be another facility like Area 51, according to the conspiracy anyway, where captured alien technology is reverse engineered. This could mean everything from developing new energy sources to building advanced propulsion systems similar to ones aliens could be using. There's also rumors that Pinegap has underground facilities specifically designed for housing alien artifacts and possibly even extraterrestrial beings themselves. Let's get into some detail on a UFO sighting specifically, shall we? One of the most talked about encounters at Pinegap happened early in the morning on December 22nd of 1989. So 3 men were heading home after an all-night hunting trip when something out of the ordinary caught their attention. It was around 4:30 a.m. when they noticed what looked like a door. But it was camouflaged to blend into its surroundings. Suddenly it opened right in front of them, and from behind it there was a huge metallic gray disc. The disc moved slightly, hovering over the base for a few moments. The hunters stood there, frozen in shock, and watched as this disc shot upwards and then vanished into the sky. As they tried to process what they'd just seen, they saw the camouflage door slowly move back into place, sealing shut as if it had never been there. Pinegap employs around 1,000 people, and most of them live in the nearby town of Alice Springs. The workers are a mix of Australian and US intelligence personnel, but Alice Springs has a large American population, thanks to Pinegap obviously, and visitors and townsfolk will often say, if you ask any of these Americans about their jobs, the common answer you'll get is that they're gardeners. It's apparently so common that it's become kind of an inside joke. Are all these people who say they're gardeners really gardeners, or could gardener be a cover for the real work these individuals do at the facility? Some people think that these so-called gardeners are involved in secretive operations at Pinegap. Gardening, it's a pretty low-key profession, makes for a pretty convenient front for intelligence personnel and want to avoid drawing attention. At least that's what I'd say if everyone else hadn't picked that front too. I mean, you know, baker, carpenter, plenty of jobs to pick from, guys. Weather control. No, Pinegap isn't even safe from accusations of weather control. This theory is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The idea is that the facility has the capability to manipulate weather patterns using advanced technology to create or alter it. And maybe they have help from some of that alien technology they're reverse engineering. Again, even without the possible secret alien technology hidden inside, people see the sophisticated equipment combined with the secretive nature of the facility, and questions start to form in people's heads like, could they be playing God and screwing with the weather? Could they be using methods like cloud seeding or even more advanced techniques, creating rain in drought-stricken areas? That would be nice. Or maybe they're working on ways to weaponize the weather. The concept of weather control isn't entirely far-fetched either. Various governments have been known to have explored weather modification in the past.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the WOW signal. In August of 1977, there was a radio telescope at Ohio State University that detected a strange signal. The radio picked up a pulse of radiation that was super unusual and that was coming from somewhere by the constellation of Sagittarius. The signal lasted for 37 seconds, and it has been commonly referred to as the WOW signal because of the fact that the astronomers observing it were so shocked at the time that they wrote "wow" on the printout from the telescope. This signal was so shocking because it was in a band of radio frequencies that are internationally banned on Earth. There are a multitude of natural sources for radiation in space that would cover a multitude of frequencies, so there are scientists who are skeptical that this could be proof of alien life, life, but skepticism doesn't mean it should be ruled out. The nearest star in the direction it was coming from is 220 million light years away, so it must have either come from a huge astronomical event or intelligent alien life with a very powerful transmitter who are trying to contact us. At the end of the day, this signal was detected in 1977 and we still don't know exactly where it's coming from or why it exists, so who's to say this isn't something super exciting and possibly related to potential alien life. In our number 9 spot today we have methane on Mars. As we all know, we are constantly looking at Mars and searching for not only the potential for a new planet for us to live on, but also potential signs of alien life that may already exist there, or perhaps evidence of a past alien existence. In 2004, we might have found some evidence that would suggest this is a strong possibility, and that is the discovery of methane gas in the atmosphere of Mars. In that year, 3 separate groups all independently reported the finding of the methane gas, and considering almost all of the methane in Earth's atmosphere is produced by bacteria and other life, this was extremely promising for scientists. There are other possibilities for the methane, such as the thawing of frozen underground deposits, or it could be generated by volcanism, but whatever the cause, it would have to be recent since it will either be destroyed quickly on Mars or it will escape into the rest of space. To potentially strengthen this point, in 2005 scientists also announced that they may have found evidence of formaldehyde, which was produced by the oxidization of methane. If this is true, that will only strengthen the case for potential microbes to be found on the planet. The good news is that while all these potential signs came from almost 20 years ago, and there wasn't the technology to prove any of these claims, we now have the technology actually on the planet digging in the soil, and we are much closer to getting real answers about what is going on Mars than we ever have been before. I mean, we can see Mars in 4K, which is unreal. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. And if the aliens ever go on YouTube, we want them to know that we like them. See what I did there? In our number 8 spot today, we have the ancient sightings. This evidence comes from long before any of us were alive, but that doesn't mean it isn't potentially important. There have of course been recent UFO sightings and sometimes even reported alien visits or abductions, but with pop culture and media, it's easy for us to write these off as hoaxes, or people who are trying to receive their 5 minutes of fame, or people who thought they saw something but were mistaken by another piece of human technology. But what about the people who claimed these kinds of sightings long before the internet or international news or even human-made flying objects existed? Even in our ancient history, there have been writings and paintings of the potentially extraterrestrial variety. As one example, the 15th century painting The Madonna with Saint Giovannino depicts the Virgin Mary, but also in the background features some sort of hovering disc-like object that looks a lot like a UFO. This isn't the only example, however, as we've also seen some sort of otherworldly beings in ancient cave paintings and Sanskrit scrolls, and there have even been some people who swear it is also written in the Book of Ezekiel. It certainly says something that potential alien sightings have existed since so far back in our human history, so it must either point to proof of alien existence or just human beings being obsessed with conspiracies right from the beginning of our existence. In our number 7 spot today, we have Titan. Many space agencies have turned their main focus on the search for extraterrestrial life, from advanced intelligent life forms to more primitive and smaller life forms, and that starts with the smallest organisms and microbes. To help with this study and process, NASA is preparing a $4.25 billion mission to Europa, which is one of Jupiter's moons that we have previously discussed, since scientists believe it holds a strong potential for alien microbes under its icy surface. This study is aiming to be launched in 2024, which is quickly approaching, but there is another mission also in the works that is focusing on another moon that we haven't spoken yet about, and that is the moon of Saturn called Titan. In 2027, they're aiming to launch the $1 billion Dragonfly mission to this moon in order to analyze the lakes of liquid methane that exist on Titan. A planetary scientist at Johns Hopkins University who studies alien atmosphere named Sarah Horst has said that they believe Titan has all the ingredients necessary for life, so it certainly is a very promising mission. We may have to wait until 2027, but who knows? Maybe we'll find signs even before with all the upcoming missions and technological advancements. In our number 6 spot today, we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of this year, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up feed from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix, around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us." After this, he followed up with, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over top of us." Not only were the FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen way more often than any of us realize, and it is possible that the object could have been part of some covert military or navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this was one of those stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. In our number 5 spot today, we have the radiation-proof bacteria. This is a sign that we could be very close to finding out more about due to the Perseverance rover that is currently searching on Mars. In 2002, Russian astrobiologists hypothesized that a bacteria here on Earth may have actually evolved on Mars. This bacteria is the most tough bacteria on Earth. It can withstand even the most extreme conditions such as cold, dehydration, vacuum, and acid, but the craziest part is that it is virtually radiation proof. These little microbes can withstand several thousand times the amount of radiation a human can withstand, as well as more radiation than any other bacteria on Earth. You can even find this bacteria on the inside of a nuclear reactor. Scientists did an experiment to see how quickly this bacteria could build up a stronger radiation resistance by zapping the bacteria with enough radiation to kill 99.9% of it, then leaving the remaining 0.1% to repopulate before zapping it again and repeating the process. It was concluded that it would have taken E. coli thousands and thousands of rounds to build up the same resistance that this hardy bacteria did in only 44 rounds. With this experiment, and based on the dose of radiation they gave each bacteria, it would take millions and millions of years to get even close to the amount of radiation they gave the bacteria in one cycle. Since Earth just doesn't carry that amount of radiation, it has led some scientists to speculate that since Mars is virtually unprotected and receives extremely high amounts of radiation, these bacteria may have evolved on Mars and gained their resistance in just a few 100,000 years, and that they may have been flung off of Mars by an asteroid and then brought to Earth on meteorites. It certainly is just a hypothesis at this point, but really, how else can we explain this random superpowered bacteria that is unlike any else on our Earth? I know these bacteria aren't the signs of alien life we are expecting and hoping for, but any alien life is exciting no matter how small. In our number 4 spot today, we have Frederick Valentich. Frederick was an Australian pilot who disappeared under some unbelievably suspicious circumstances on a training flight on October 21st, 1978. During the flight, he radioed the Melbourne Air Traffic Control to let them know that he was being accompanied by an aircraft that was around 1,000 feet above him, and at the same time that his engine had begun to run roughly. Air Traffic Control responded to him by explaining that there was no known air traffic at that level, and Frederick explained he could see a large unknown aircraft with 4 bright landing lights. He explained the aircraft approached him from the east and at first thought it was another pilot playing around with him, which for the record, during a flight seems like a terrible time for someone to play a prank. He then went on to explain that the mysterious aircraft was orbiting him and had a green light on it. When Air Traffic Control tried to get further details and asked what kind of an aircraft it was, Frederick responded by saying, "It's not an aircraft." After this, his radio transmission was interrupted by a metallic scraping sound, and this is when all contact was lost. Sea and air search began, but to no avail. There have been speculations that don't involve alien abductions, such as a staged disappearance, the possibility of Frederick getting confused and flying upside down, and potentially even him taking his own life, but all of these theories have been debunked in some sort of way, and neither the aircraft or Frederick himself have ever been found. The reason why alien abduction has been the main theory in this case is due to the fact of the many reported UFO sightings on the same night in the same region as his disappearance. It of course leaves us with more questions than answers, but it's all very interesting and very mysterious. In our number 3 spot today, we have more mysterious signals. Okay, before I get into this point, can we just take a second to talk about how many mysterious radio signals we are getting from space? In every part of these videos, I've talked about some sort sort of unknown signal, and I'm about to talk about another one. In 2003, astronomers on the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence project used a massive telescope that is located in Puerto Rico to take a look at 200 sections of the sky to re-examine the areas where they had once detected unexplained radio signals. During this, they found that all the previously detected signals had disappeared except for one. This one signal not only didn't disappear, but it only got stronger. The signal is coming from between the constellations of Pisces and Aries, and the curious thing about this location is that it resides in a place where there are no known obvious planets or stars. The signal is at one of the frequencies that hydrogen absorbs and emits energy, and hydrogen is of course one of the most common elements. There are scientists who believe that this is the frequency alien life would be most likely to use if they were trying to contact us. There is a possibility that this signal could be coming from some sort of natural phenomena that we just haven't had a chance to previously observe, but at this point, all options are on the table. In our number 2 spot today, we have the James Webb Space Telescope. Okay, this one is a little different than the other signs we've been talking about because this is something that is happening in October of this year that could get us closer to detecting alien life than ever before. On October 31st, 2021, NASA, in partnership with the European Space Agency and the Canadian Space Agency, will be launching the James Webb Space Telescope that is a huge and very exciting advancement. This telescope will help us solve some of the mysteries of our own solar system and will give us a better look at the distant worlds that lay outside of it. There are so many gas dwarf planets that have the strong potential of holding alien life, but we just haven't had the technology to really see and investigate them because they don't live within our solar system. These super Earths or mini Neptunes need to be investigated to see what their atmospheres contain because it is very possible they are showing signs of life even if it is only microbes. Once this telescope is in orbit, it will unfold a 5-layered sun shield that will reach the size of a tennis court, and then after this a 6.5 meter primary mirror will be deployed, and this will give the telescope the power to detect faint light from stars and galaxies that lie far, far away. I know this isn't a sign of alien life yet, but the potential is absolutely amazing. Even if we don't detect alien life, we are still getting so much valuable information, and any step forward is a step closer to us finding alien life if it exists. In our number 1 spot today, we have the astronaut sightings. We can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life, but who would know more than the people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the entire world, there haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that could potentially be proof of alien existence. People who have claimed these sorts of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well with their claims. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but the mission control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with absolutely no answers on what the flying object could actually be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. I also can't believe I hadn't heard of that story before because to me that sounds a lot like full-blown alien contact. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lake Huron UFO. Just this past weekend, on Sunday, February 12th, US officials were able to confirm that the Air Force and the National Guard had downed a UFO that was seen over Lake Huron, which has a shoreline that is shared by the US state Michigan as well as the Canadian province of Ontario, where I am right now. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, a Michigan Democrat, not only confirmed the downing, but also took to Twitter to write, quote, "Great work by all who carried out this mission both in the air and back at headquarters. We're all interested in exactly what this object was and its purpose." Of course, this only worked to fuel rumors over what exactly this UFO could actually be or where it came from. The Department of Defense is said to have been tracking the flying object for some time before it decided that action needed to be taken in order to get the object out of airspace. So far, while there still hasn't been any confirmations of what exactly this object object was, it has been described as a quote octagonal structure. Right now, recovery efforts of the debris is underway, but as of filming this, there have been no official reports of what exactly this UFO might have been or where it came from. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Yukon UFO. On Saturday, February 11th, just a day before the Lake Huron UFO, a US fighter jet shot down this unidentified flying object that was in the skies above Yukon, a Canadian territory. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took to Twitter to let Canadians know that he had ordered the quote takedown of an unidentified object that violated Canadian airspace. In an effort to take down the UFO, both Canadian and US aircrafts were scrambled, and Air Force members took to the sky to execute the successful downing of the object. Canadian forces are now working to recover and analyze the wreckage of this UFO to hopefully identify its origin. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, had initially detected the object flying at a high altitude over Alaska on Friday evening, and on Saturday is when it crossed into Canadian airspace. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder explained that, quote, a US F-22 shot down the object in Canadian territory using an AIM-9X missile following close coordination between US and Canadian authorities. Both Canadians and Americans are on high alert with this UFO, considering it is just one of the many that have been taken out of airspace in the last couple weeks alone. Like I mentioned before, right now the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are working on recovering the wreckage, but the FBI will also be working closely with the RCMP during the investigation. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Alaska UFO. Okay, we're doing like a reverse timeline for these few points because now we are talking about the Alaska UFO that was shot down one day before the Yukon UFO. It was like Alaska, Yukon, Lake Huron. On February 10th, an F-22 US fighter jet shot down an unidentified object over the waters near Alaska. The object was said to have been caught flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and was deemed a quote reasonable threat to aviation, which is why the orders were given to take it down. The object was first detected the day before, and a flyby happened on the Thursday it was seen, before the second flyby and takedown which took place on the Friday. Here's where things get really suspicious though. The pilots who were sent up to investigate and take down the UFO all gave differing reports of what it was that they saw. Some of the pilots even say that the UFO interfered with their sensors, and others claimed that they couldn't see any kind of propulsion system on the object, which poses the question, how could it have possibly been just casually cruising 40,000 feet in the air? In a statement over the weekend, the US Northern Command said that they have no new information about the object's quote capabilities, purpose, or origin, and they also explained that the recovery efforts are being slowed down by the icy conditions in the region. The National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, said of the object, quote, we're calling this an object because that's the best description we have right now. He continued to say, quote, we don't know who owns it, whether it's state-owned or corporate-owned or privately owned, we just don't know. People are especially concerned about this UFO in particular because of the important military sites in Alaska, as well as its very close proximity to its neighboring countries. In our number 7 spot today, we have the balloon. On February 4th, it became public knowledge that officials were monitoring a strange object in the sky that they claimed had entered airspace above Alaska on January 28. They monitored the object as it later drifted from Idaho southeast to the Carolinas before the decision was made to take it down. This operation was carried out and the object was shot down. As it turns out, this object was realized to be some kind of a balloon. The balloon is said to have been about the size of 3 buses, and it was flying at an altitude of around 60,000 to 65,000 feet. Authorities were able to discover that the origin of this object was from China, but there are conflicting accounts of what its purpose might have been. China has maintained that the device was a civilian aircraft that strayed into American airspace, but senior American officials are seemingly believing that the balloon was originally supposed to conduct surveillance. Many believe that the spying was to be done over US military bases in Guam and Hawaii, but winds carried it off course to Alaska, Canada, and finally the United States mainland, where it was then shot down. Whatever this balloon was for, I'm just glad that we know what this one was and where it had come from, because some of these other recent UFOs are just too mysterious. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We are just scratching the surface of our time in 2023, but already there were some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there has been a total of 510 quote unidentified aerial phenomena observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing, what we as the public know is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual real secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or Navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of those stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. In our number 4 spot today, we have the 2023 sighting. This UFO video was taken recently on January 22nd, and the video was posted to Reddit by a user called MaxKeller96, and with the video, they gave some context. Quote, "My sister, dad, and I were out hiking near Picket Post when one of us noticed something glimmering near the mountain, so we stopped to look at it. All I could really make out is that it was a small bright dot in the sky. After a good 15 seconds of staring at it, just silently hanging in the air, trying to figure out what the was, I started recording. Sorry it's shaky, I could barely see my phone screen and was trying to get a good look at it with my own eyes. It then dropped 2 flare-looking things, though my sister swears she counted at least 3, and then it instantly sped off, heading south-ish. Up until that point, I thought it might have been a helicopter or a drone, as there's a lot of military/Air Force-based stuff out here, but there's no way anything can accelerate that fast. We all lost sight of it nearly instantly after video cuts, and we were all properly freaked out about it. I've replayed the video probably 100 times and tried showing it to everyone I know, and no one had any idea what it could be other than a super high-end drone. If you think you know, please let me know. After watching the video also probably 100 times, I can definitely say that I have no idea what they all saw that day, because I also really don't think it was a drone. I also have to say that this video even gathered people together on Reddit, and that is no easy feat. Redditors are ruthless, and often very skeptical, and still people are pretty on board and confused over what this could have been. In our number 3 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004, but footage of it was released in 2017. On November 14th of 2004, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Ace's Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it, like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust, which is especially peculiar when we think of what the pilots who just shot down the Alaska UFO said. No propulsion, right? Gives me chills just thinking about it, because how could that be possible? The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like, when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. Faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what this was, because it definitely seems like we don't have the technology to make this sort of thing possible. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006, and it was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating at around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for about 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole in the clouds where you could see the blue sky through. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar, so the Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw exactly the same thing. This story did, however, become one of the most read stories on the Chicago Tribune's website and even went international because it certainly is very interesting. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half a mile wide. Craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to the US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for the human civilization.
In August of 1976, 4 men went on a camping trip in the Allagash Wilderness in Maine. Jack and Jim Weiner, along with Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz, were off on what was supposed to be this peaceful getaway when things took a turn. On their second night, Jim spotted a bright object in the sky. It was there for about 30 seconds, then it disappeared. Not super out of the ordinary in the deep woods, the sky is just lit up with stars at night, easy to misidentify things, but 2 nights later, while they were out fishing, the same bright object appeared a second time. Chuck noticed it at first. It looked super intense. This time it was almost like the sun, they said, and they watched it as it followed them along the water. Charlie, thinking it was some kind of signal, even tried to flash an SOS to the object. And that's when things got really weird. They described this light shooting a beam down towards them, which followed them all the way back to shore. And when they got back to their campsite, something else was off. The fire they'd left burning was completely out, and they felt totally exhausted, like they'd been gone for hours. The next few days were uneventful, and they didn't see the light again, but after they got back home, the men started having these disturbing nightmares, often about sitting naked on a bench, feeling afraid. That night stuck with the men, but it wasn't until 1988 that they finally had had enough and decided to seek out answers. Jim reached out to UFO researcher Ray Fowler, and they all agreed to undergo hypnosis to try and make sense of these strange memories. And under this hypnosis, each man recalled being abducted by aliens. They described terrifying beings practicing medical exams on them, even having their skin and bodily fluids taken. Later, when they compared notes, they realized that their memories matched up exactly. They even passed polygraph tests. On the night of October 11th, 1973 in Pascagoula, Mississippi, 2 men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, had a terrifying encounter they were never able to explain. While fishing off a pier by the Pascagoula River, they heard a strange whirring sound and saw flashing blue lights. Next thing they knew, an oval-shaped object about 30 to 40 feet across appeared above them. They were completely paralyzed as 3 bizarre creatures with robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the craft. Once inside, Hickson and Parker claimed the creatures performed some kind of examination on them. They both stayed silent for years about the details, but Hickson eventually opened up, even writing a book in 1983 about the encounter. Parker was quieter at first, but started attending UFO conventions, and in 2018, he released his own book, giving his side of the story for the first time. In 2019, the site of the abduction was marked with a plaque to honor the event, and Parker, deeply emotional, said he wanted to be buried there someday. Hickson passed away in 2011, but Parker continued to speak about the encounter until his death in 2023. Of course, some say the two made this story up, but what if they didn't? What if something actually happened to these two men that they were never able to forget, and writing it all down and sharing their story with the world was their only way of working through something that they couldn't even begin to understand? In 1979, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson from Marshall County, Minnesota, had a strange encounter while on patrol. On the night of August 27th, around 2 a.m., he saw a beam of light just above the road near Stephen, Minnesota. The light shot toward him and engulfed his squad car. Johnson reported hearing glass breaking before losing consciousness. When he came to, 39 minutes had passed. The car's windshield was shattered, one of the headlights and the red emergency light were damaged, and the radio antenna was bent. When backup deputies arrived, they found Johnson's squad car sideways on the road. He had bruises and eye irritation, which a doctor later compared to burns from a welder's torch. When Johnson's story came out, it gained a lot of attention. All it did was make matters worse, though. Johnson would later say it, understandably, caused a lot of emotional distress for him and his family. Till this day, nobody knows exactly what happened that night, but part of me wonders if he just got into a car accident and was too embarrassed to admit it. Not to ruin the party or anything, but I don't know. What do you all think of this one? This next one is really weird, so strap in. So in 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Vilas Boas had one of the craziest nights of his life. On October 15th, while working late in the fields, he spotted this bright red star-like object in the sky. The object came down, eventually landing. It was an egg-shaped craft, and from it came these humanoid figures. They were about 5 feet tall with small blue eyes and white hair, and they were dressed in what looked like these gray overalls or equipment, and they had these helmets on. Before he knew it, Antonio was grabbed and taken aboard the craft. Once inside, the aliens took samples of his bodily fluids and performed a whole series of other medical examinations. Then they led him into another room, where he was introduced to a female humanoid, according to him, a very attractive one. He described her as having small round eyes, white hair, and a human-like appearance. And after some strange interactions, well, you can guess what happened next. And once the bizarre encounter was over, the craft released him back into the field and took off. Antonio, understandably shaken, eventually told his family about it. Not sure how that conversation would have gone, but I'm gonna assume it was awkward. His story soon caught the attention of the Brazilian military and the media. People had a lot of questions. Some thought his story was incredible. Some just laughed him off. But Antonio stuck by his story all the way up until his death in 1991. On September 3rd of 1965, 18-year-old Norman Muscarello was hitchhiking home along Route 150 in New Hampshire. Around 2 a.m., he saw 5 bright red lights hovering above the trees. At first he thought they were police or fire lights, but when he got closer he realized the lights were coming from a massive object around 80 to 90 feet wide, but somehow was completely silent. Panicking, he drove into a ditch and watched in horror as this object started moving toward him, before changing direction and hovering over a nearby farmhouse. Norman ran to a neighbor's house for help, but he got no response. Eventually he flagged down a car and was driven to the local police station, where he told Officer Reginald Toland about what he saw. Toland was already familiar with Muscarello and he took him seriously. He radioed Officer Eugene Bertrand to investigate, and when they went back to the sighting location, the object did appear again, hovering silently and rocking back and forth. The officers just stood there completely stunned, not knowing what to do, before the thing disappeared. After the police reported the incident, the Air Force investigated, but their helpful explanation was that it was just stars or a military exercise. Muscarello and the officers weren't so convinced, nor are a lot of people who've heard about the story in the years since. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, a couple from New Hampshire, became one of the most famous cases of alien abduction. After a vacation, they were driving home when they noticed this strange light in the sky. At first, Betty thought it was a falling star, but it moved erratically and it was getting larger and brighter. Eventually, Barney decided to just pull over so they could take a look. As they watched, Betty saw some sort of craft with multicolored lights moving across the moon. They continued to stare for a while, but what happened next nearly gave them a heart attack. Suddenly, the craft dropped down toward their car and just hovered above it. Barney stepped out and, using binoculars, he looked up to see a bunch of what he said were humanoid figures inside this craft. One figure seemed to communicate with him telepathically, warning him to stay where he was. Terrified, Barney ran back to the car and the couple just sped off. As they drove away, they heard a strange beeping sound, and then they lost track of time, suddenly finding themselves near Concord hours later than they'd expected. When they got home, they noticed other odd things too. Their clothes were damaged, their watches had stopped working, and there was a strange pink powder on Betty's dress. The Hills couldn't explain what had happened, and both underwent hypnosis sessions later on, which revealed eerie, consistent memories of an alien abduction. On December 1st, 1987, a retired police officer known only as Spencer to the press was out for a walk in Ilkley Moor in England. While climbing a small hill, he saw a strange figure ahead of him, about 4 feet tall, dark green, with an oversized head and long, thin arms. The figure made a gesture that seemed to warn Spencer to stay back, but instead he took out his camera and he snapped a photo. The creature then ran off. Spencer followed but lost track of it in the fog. That's when Spencer saw a craft rise from the moor. He said it had 2 saucer-shaped parts stacked on top of each other and that it hummed loudly as it disappeared into the sky. At this point, Spencer decided that his walk was over and he started heading to town, only to realize he was hours later than he should have been. His compass was also pointing in the wrong direction. In the days that followed, Spencer reached out to UFO researchers Jenny Randalls and Peter Howe. The photograph Spencer took was examined by experts, and while it couldn't be proven to be fake, it was also too grainy for any real conclusion either. According to UFOologist Nick Redfern, Spencer was also visited by 2 men in black who apparently intimidated him into staying silent. On the night of August 21st, 1955, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a bizarre incident took place that has gone down as one of the craziest cryptid reports of all time, at least that I've read about. A group of 12 people who'd been staying at their small family farm rushed to the local police station saying that they had been under attack by small, alien-looking creatures. They claimed these creatures were about 3 to 4 feet tall and were peeking into their farmhouse windows and doorways, and that they'd been fighting them off for hours. And this all happened after they saw some weird light descend into the trees by the farmhouse. So 2 adults, Elmer Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor, described seeing short, dark figures popping up and even tried to hold them off with gunfire. Soon police, state troopers, and military personnel from nearby Fort Campbell showed up to investigate. What they found were signs of gunfire and holes in the farmhouse's windows and door screens, but no sign of any creatures. The following day, the family packed up and they left the farmhouse. The mysterious creatures were never seen again. November of 1979, Robert Taylor, a forestry worker from Scotland, had an encounter that left him badly shaken and injured. Taylor had gone for a walk near Dutchmont Law, a wooded area in Livingston, when he'd claimed to see a strange flying dome. He described the object as a large metallic sphere about 7 yards in diameter, hovering above the ground. It also had a rough sandpaper-like texture and small propellers on its rim. According to Taylor, the thing sprouted smaller spheres, which he compared to sea mines, that started dragging him toward the larger object. Then everything went black. When he came to, the strange craft and smaller objects were gone. Taylor tried to start his truck, but it wasn't working, so he walked home. When he got home, his wife was in shock. Taylor was disheveled, his clothes were torn, and he had grazes on his chin and thighs. The police were called, and after examining the site, they found odd marks in the ground, which Taylor said were caused by these strange objects. Finally, in November of 1980, Alan Godfrey, a police constable in West Yorkshire, was responding to reports of cattle roaming a council estate when he saw this strange diamond-shaped light hovering above the road. It was about 20 feet high and 14 feet wide, rotating slowly. He tried to radio for backup, but his equipment suddenly wasn't working. And then, just like that, the object vanished. Godfrey found himself 30 yards down the road. He was unable to explain where the last 30 minutes had gone. He also had a split boot and a strange red mark on his foot. Later, under hypnosis, Godfrey recalled being hit by a beam of light, causing him to lose consciousness. He remembered then waking up inside a room being examined by small, non-human beings and a more humanoid figure. Godfrey would later say it was possible the whole thing was a dream, but at the time, he felt very strongly that what he experienced was real. He also thought the experience led to his early retirement from the police force. A strange UFO sighting was captured over New Jersey recently. In a 13-second clip shot near Atlantic City on a Sunday night back in December, a strange white light blinks in the sky before suddenly vanishing. Family members who were watching the light in the sky were completely baffled by what they were looking at. The thing just kind of hovers in the sky, slightly flickering before it looks like it disappears. Turns out that's not exactly the case. A man named Tim Janicki, who received the footage from a friend, posted it online with the heading reading, "I don't trust random videos I see on X, but this is 100% real." So this video has been getting shared around quite a bit. One commenter pointed out, "You can see it didn't just disappear, but it took off with incredible speed. There's a small flash of light to the left as it leaves. Humans can't produce the energy required to go that fast, especially from standstill." And that's true. If you look closely, you do see this really quick blip of light appear in the upper left of the screen right after the strange orb of light looks like it vanishes. Other people commented similar things, like one person saying, "No flight system we have right now can go from stationary to warp drive in an instant. These flight characteristics are well beyond light years ahead of us." Now, this is just one incident in a long list of strange sightings in the sky over New Jersey, which led the FAA to briefly limit drone flights in some areas. The FBI and other federal agencies have been looking into a bunch of the reports apparently, and they claim that so far they haven't found anything pointing to a national security threat. Again, so they say. This footage here was posted to Reddit by user Yogurt Closet Flat 5701 just a couple weeks ago with the caption, "This just happened above Brookville Boulevard, Snake Road in Queens, New York, right next to JFK Airport. We looked up and there were 4 orange orbs in formation in what is supposed to be a no-fly zone. They then started to disappear. Did anybody else in the area witness this?" End of post. And that's a good question. Any New Yorkers in the comments see this as well? Let us know down in the comments here. There are some interesting comments from other witnesses on the post though. One user, Zora Octavia, wrote, "Lived here for 14 years with planes flying by all day, every day. They fly so low it feels like you can almost touch them. I know what they look like when they come into land and take off. I have never seen anything like this. Ever." And that's not the only strange orange orb that's been spotted in the sky recently. On December 26th, a Redditor by the name of Hell Followed 84 posted this footage. The video was shot in central Georgia. A father had gone to take out the trash when he spotted the strange orb in the sky. He noticed something, quote, "bright and orange overhead through the pines." He pointed it out to his son and they both just stared at it for several minutes before deciding to film it. The father shared the video on Reddit. In the clip we see this glowing orange orb gliding across the sky, weaving between the tops of pine trees. At one point, the orb looks like it dims and then vanishes entirely. As Hell Followed 84 wrote, "When I first observed it, the light was huge, but it was way off, like half a mile. As it got closer, it seemed to dim but stayed the same luminous lighting. As I walked further to capture it, I thought, what if it was trying to evade me?" A bunch of Redditors wondered if it could be a plane, but the user didn't think so, saying it made no sound, unlike the planes that frequently fly over his home. And we're back to New Jersey with another set of strange lights in the sky captured on camera recently. A YouTuber named CJ Faison recently posted footage showing what he believes are drones flying in, quote, "deliberate formations" off the coast of New Jersey over the Atlantic Ocean. He took a boat 26 miles out from the Pine Barrens to get the footage using a night vision camera. In the video, he'd gone out to get footage of the mysterious drones that people have been spotting in the skies over the last couple months. He did manage to capture a bunch of these blinking lights in the sky. Some are stationary, Some are seen moving through the sky, some appear and disappear completely, and some of the drones seem to zip across the horizon at incredible speeds. It is definitely odd. CJ wrote in the video description, "The drones in New Jersey have been seen coming from the ocean for several weeks. We found UAP drones in the middle of the ocean 100%. This is something they don't want you to see." Now, sure, people have access to drones nowadays. There are more things in the sky than there ever have been in history, but it seems like people are spotting particularly bright, rather large objects moving at speeds way too fast to be your over-the-counter drone. And again, the FBI is getting involved. They've investigated around 5,000 reports about these drones, claiming that about 100 of them are considered credible. As of now, there have been no clear answers from authorities on who's behind the drones or what they're up to. This next report comes out again from New Jersey. This time, it's not just lights in the sky though. Whatever this object was, it actually affected the clock in a family's car. In early December, a family reported a strange effect while following one of these strange crafts that people have been seeing in the sky. As they drove along, the car's clock suddenly changed time, then went back to normal once they drove away. Local law enforcement in Morris County insists that there's no known threat to public safety, but residents are still trying to figure out what's going on themselves. There's even a Facebook group with over 17,000 members exchanging info on these sightings. One local software engineer, Rich Dunjewski, thinks the clock change might be a clue. He commented, "Many newer cars get their clock time from GPS satellites," adding that the drones could be using GPS jamming or spoofing. He went on to say that if these drones are using, quote, GPS jamming, then it's plausible the car would follow the signal and change the clock. FAA contractor David Lombardo agreed, saying these drones likely have electronic interference capabilities. A strange UAP was captured on camera back in 2018, but the video was kept secret for years. It was just released to the public last year in January of 2024. The object was spotted flying over a US military base in Iraq and was tracked by a military infrared radar. It moved across the base before making a controlled descent into a body of water. About 17 minutes later, it reappeared and took off at an incredible speed. The Pentagon has officially classified it as a UAP. What caught a lot of attention was how quickly the object changed color. You'll notice that the object keeps switching from this semi-translucent look to black. And since the video was shot using infrared, the color changes indicate shifts in temperature. The object was changing temperature so fast that it actually made it difficult for the radar to even track. And according to Dr. Matthew Sadagis, a physics professor at the University of Albany, it was doing this, quote, faster than any known object. This next video comes from the YouTube channel Plant Abundance, who wrote in the description that he'd been outside doing some tree work when this bright object caught his eye. He watched it as it stayed stationary for about a minute and a half before fetching his camera. He caught the tail end of it before it drifted downward and faded out. Again, this is another recent clip posted on October 14th of 2024. Now the object is hard to make out. It's obviously pretty high up, but zooming in, it's definitely not a plane or a satellite. It doesn't even look like your typical drone. It looks like a spherical metallic object. So what is it? I don't know. What do you all think? This footage was taken a few years ago. It's another spherical flying orb. The AARO, the office within the US Department of Defense that handles UAPs, released the footage captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone during a Senate hearing in the Middle East. The video shows an orb smoothly flying through the sky at a high speed. The AARO came out saying that they had no idea what it was, calling it a genuine UAP, but they also mentioned it was not the first time they'd seen something like it. On December 16th of 2024, tourists at Disney World in Orlando caught sight of a glowing red UFO streaking upward in the night sky. The object kind of looks like a falling star, but in reverse. The video made the rounds on TikTok with people commenting it was a UAP of extraterrestrial origin. Now, unlike a lot of the other stuff on this list, this one may have a very clear explanation, and while that explanation probably isn't aliens, it's still pretty cool. The glowing streak was probably a SpaceX rocket that launched that night. Falcon 9's reusable booster successfully landed in the Atlantic after 8.5 minutes. SpaceX was transporting a GPS satellite for the US military. There was a similar sighting near Disney on December 23rd, also very likely a SpaceX mission. mission. So this final story comes from a new docu-series called Investigation Alien. Footage was captured showing a strange object descending into the English Channel. The series follows journalist George Knapp and his team, including underwater archaeologist Rory Kremer, as they dig into evidence of extraterrestrial life. During one of their expeditions off the coast of Normandy, they spotted an illuminated object about 200 yards away. At first, it was stationary, but then it sped off, only to return later, but at that point, most of the crew was asleep. Kremer, though, was on night watch, and he was able to capture the object on camera as it plummeted into the water. Knapp was shocked when he saw the footage. He returned Kremer for an explanation, and Kremer, who's been in the field for over 20 years, admitted, "I don't got any answers, do you?" He thought it might be a flare, but it didn't have the typical smoke. As the object disappeared into the water, Knapp suggested it could be tied to some sort of subterranean base. Kremer pointed out that local tribes in the region have long reported unexplained lights, which were often linked to gods. They both agreed that the footage could be evidence of something much bigger lurking beneath the surface. Now, is this story legit or just a clever way of promoting the series? That's for you to decide. But based on everything on this list, could very well be aliens.
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The Coin Incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the Coin Incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sightings, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and second deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents, as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?